we are all connected, kind of this like underlying vibration, drum beat, kind of reminding me as I move forward toward this light.
I love that you glossed over the statement of like, they were giving me some information why we come here. So hold on, rewind that. Like, what did they communicate with you about why we come here that you could share?
Sure. Yeah, and I've tried to put it into our language the best way I can. Um, we we experience all of this love on the other side, and we're also able to be aware of what's happening to our loved ones on Earth. We can communicate with our loved ones on Earth. It's a two-way conversation, sometimes multiple-way conversation, right? But we can, and so we're aware of what's going on. It's not like always present in our mind, but we can kind of check in. Um, and since it's not, again, it's not really our mind, but we can check in, and also like we have this omnipotence, right? And so we kind of know when to check in. We see that the earth struggles. Like we see that the humans struggle. We see that there's strife and there's pain and um, guilt and shame and greed and all these things, right? We see that humans struggle, and we know that that's part of the human experience, but we want to change that. So some of us get called to say, we're going to come back.
My guest today is Melinda Peterson, who had a very rare atopic pregnancy that went undiagnosed for 25 weeks. And as a result, she had an NDE where she lost her baby. But she was given very precious information that helped her heal. And I think by watching her video today, if you've experienced some type of a loss along these lines, that this is the video to help you. So, Melinda, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Lori. I love your work, and I appreciate you welcoming me into your presence today. It's just
Oh, well,
great.
that makes me want to cry. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you because I know that there are a lot of people who are watching who have experienced a loss, a miscarriage, a baby that didn't go to term, or maybe even a loss of a child afterwards. And I think a lot of times when people experience this type of a loss, they think back and they think to themselves, well, I should have done this. I could have done this. There are all these things, and they wind up spending maybe the rest of their lives beating themselves up for what they could have, would have, should have done. And that is why I was so excited to talk to you today, because your story is very empowering. And I believe that when we get new information, that sometimes it helps us to let go of things maybe that we're holding on to that are not serving us in this lifetime. So I'm really excited for you to tell your story, but why don't we start with what your life was like before this happened?
I love that question. I was always a really curious kid, and I was particularly curious about like, the things that my body could do. Like I felt like I was actually coming into this new experience as a child and starting to learn my body. Everything from like my hands could carry books, they could carry stuffed animals. Like, what are these like amazing things that, right? That give me this ability to do these things. I love to run, I love to play, I love to move and just experience my body, like an awakening. And then over time, being a woman, and especially being a brown woman in the society, there were so many stories and expectations put on me to look a certain way, to act a certain way. My body needed to be a certain weight. My body needed to be a certain, you name it, dress a certain way. And those stories separated me from my body to the point to where I have a master's degree before I became a nurse, before I became a healer. And I knew very little about how my body worked and how the medical system functioned. And when I became pregnant, which was a glorious, wonderful thing, I was then thrust into this medical experience for really the first time ever. I mean, before I'd done checkups and all that, but I really didn't really know what was going on with my body. And as in relationship to that, I also didn't, I just expected that, there's that story of, if you pass like the 9-week mark or the 12-week mark, you're fine, right? And the baby will be carried to term and everything in your pregnancy will be fine. And so that's something I also expected and just kind of held on and trusted everybody in the medical community to hold me in this space. As I progress, and I will say too, as far as religion, or spirituality, I was I'm an environmental scientist trained, and I really love nature and I love being out in nature. And my practice spiritually was, or thoughts about death were really, we'll die, we'll go back into the ground, it'll be okay because we'll become flowers, we'll become dirt, but there's really nothing left for our consciousness afterwards. We just become flowers, and then that's kind of our gift, right? Or whatever we become, food for animals, that's our gift, but we don't really, our consciousness doesn't really move forward. And as a religious background, my parents were married Jewish and Catholic, and so they kind of both left their religions to become a family, and so it was very open-ended. We didn't really have any guidance. There weren't any, and it wasn't anything strict, and so I just kind of accepted that we're part of nature. It's all very scientific and container. It's beautiful, but it's not. There's no continuing of consciousness. And I also questioned, especially as a kid, getting back to that a little bit, because I didn't really have religious or spiritual guidance. I did tend to question, if I don't, could there be something really terrible for me on the side, and on the other side, given that I haven't accepted, right? I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in the Midwest. It was very, there's a lot of Christian, Lutheran. And so a lot of other kids would tell me, well, if you don't believe this, or if you don't have a belief, or you don't go to church, right? Things could be really bad for you on the other side. You could go to hell. So I knew that language really young as well. And so even though as I got older and I started to accept that, I become flowers, there still was like a little tinge in my mind of, well, since I don't have like a spiritual or religion, that it could be very dark for me. And so I had that fear. And I will say though, I also had some dreams in my early 20s in particular, that told me it would be okay. That really kind of worked through that process for me. And a number of those things were, now I can recognize they were my spiritual beings coming into my existence early, but I didn't know that at the time, and they were coming into my dreams. So fast forward to being pregnant and kind of being separated from my experience of my body. I knew it was growing. I knew the baby was growing. I knew I had to get the ultrasounds and the checkups, and I did all the things. And I started to notice that the baby was growing more on my left side than on my right side. And I brought it up to my doctors multiple times, and they said, "Oh, you're a new mom. Babies move around. Things happen, right? Babies move around. Maybe it's just mostly on your left side." And I would say no. I recognize that it's actually like, this can't be right. It's growing on one side and not on the other, and it's kind of like my stomach's lopsided. And I continued to kind of push, and I knew that something was off. Had no idea how serious it was, but I knew something was off. And in the meantime, we moved out west to raise our family, and we had an opportunity to move out west. And so I was about 22 weeks at this point. And I had told the doctors here, because I was setting up for my appointments here, that this was happening. And they said, "We're going to look into this." And they took me more seriously, which was wonderful. And then we decided to take a trip, a baby moon, and then we came back and I was supposed to have my appointment. And that day I ate a sandwich. And because I had told all of my stories about what I should and shouldn't do, what I should and shouldn't eat, and all these things, I started to feel pain and I blamed the sandwich. So I thought it was indigestion. I said, I know better than to eat the sandwich. It was like a very mayonnaise chicken, white bread, all the things, right, that you're told not to eat. So I blamed the sandwich and I said, this is my fault. I'm having indigestion pain. This is my fault. I kept ignoring it. Um, and the pain got progressively worse. I tried peppermint tea. I tried moving different positions. I told my husband I just need to go to sleep. If I had gone to sleep, I would not be here right now. And so I just really, all of the signals, all of the things that my body was trying to tell me, I was just pushing aside, right? That's not important. And because you're being cared for, you're being protected, it's not important. And you were already told that you're a first time mom, so you really don't understand what's happening to you anyway, right? Those words of shame, those stories of shame, those stories of um, that just we don't have this innate wisdom within us that we can trust. And so at this point, I started hyperventilating, and my husband said, "Okay, I'm going to call 911." And this was the point when I started noticing like something's really, really bad. This is taking a turn for the worse. And I was really having trouble, struggling to get my breath. My husband called the paramedics who came right away. We had just moved here, so everybody's out on the street watching this go down. All everybody's left their house and watching me. They know I'm pregnant. I had a neighbor immediately like offer to watch our dog, which was incredible. And so I had no idea what was going to happen. I just assumed, I'd go get this checked out and I'd be home in a day. Well, it didn't end up that way. I ended up in a coma for 2 weeks and in the hospital for over a month after what had happened was my uterus ruptured and I bled out from the inside. And I was completely unaware because, you know, I mean, not to get too graphic, but nothing came from the outside. My cervix was closed. So as a result of that, I lost my son, and we didn't want to know the gender. We wanted to be surprised. So that was the first piece of information that once they did the ultrasound, that my husband had received. And I was gone, and they were trying to resuscitate me, and trying to figure out what was wrong because again, it was all encapsulated within me. And then when they ran the ultrasound, they saw the bleeding. And by this point, I was off into my near-death experience. But I was watching things as well happen to my body. So as I mentioned before, I wasn't exactly sure, what happened after death to our consciousness. And the first indication that we continue on for me was when I got to the hospital, everything went black. Um, everybody started, so the medical professionals started to surround me, and that was the last thing I remembered in my like alive consciousness. And then everything went black, and it just felt like there was this extended period of time where there's just nothingness, but it wasn't scary. There was just a nothingness. And then I heard a voice um, that sounded like me, or I knew it was me, right? I knew consciously was me. And it said, "Did I just die?" And at that point, it was the spark of awareness. Okay, I'm continuing on. I am separating from my body. Like there's something else here that's asking, did I just die? Because I'm already gone, right? And it was at that point that I was thrust into this brilliant experience of light. And it was like moving toward the stars, moving toward the planets, just gorgeous. The best way I can describe it too is, some of the photos that we see um, from our super wonderful te- telescopes, right? Some of these photos like kind of make me feel like, okay, a settling, like that was home, right? Um, that's one way to kind of explain it, but the light was just so infusing into my being, and it just felt like love. It felt like love, and it felt like safety, and it felt like ultimate trust. And I was experiencing this, and I had an awareness too of what was happening to my body. So it was kind of like I was living simultaneously in both worlds. Um, and also, since time does not exist on the other side, I was having sometimes it's difficult for me to explain it in linear form, but I had an awareness of what was happening to my body. I was recognizing names of doctors, procedures that they were trying, things that they were doing. And I actually, now that I'm a nurse, I actually looked back at my medical records, and because I asked people that were around me, did this person see me? Did this person do this? What happened here? And I actually got confirmation from my medical records that this did indeed happen. So I was having this experience, immediately was infused with love and safety and trust. Um, did not feel scared, did not feel pain. The only real sense I had left that was helping me kind of notice what was happening to my body, but it was slowly kind of transforming, was sound, was hearing, because I was hearing things happen, but then it was slowly transforming into this really beautiful infusion of music. And I started to recognize beings around me. And the best way really I can describe them is that they had their formation was really just like, it looked like a neon light sign, but really beautiful and brilliant. And these beings came to me, and I recognized them as people I knew who had passed on, animals that I knew who had passed on, and but also beings that I knew um, in deep in my soul, but I did not know in this waking life. And it was like a wonderful homecoming. And there was one guide in particular who sort of was the guide like through the whole experience to kind of remind me of this safety and this warmth and this peace, and not to be afraid. And believe me, that fear was like obliterated. I mean, that wasn't even really a thing, but I think it was just because there was this transformation process of when your body starts to die and then you go into the other side, that there's a need for reminding. And I interpret that spirit guide as being potentially an uncle that I never got to meet, but I've always felt really connected to. He died before I was born, but he also had an appearance. He had kind of hippie long hair, and he had a beard, and so he also kind of had an appearance of Jesus. And the way that I kind of recognize this in this, because he could be either, but also like we're all one. And so he could be all of those things, right? Um, he, but I think I interpret it as Uncle Michael originally, just to kind of like get me, um, you know, familiarity in that experience, but also like as time has gone on, I've reflected on it more, and I'm like, I also see him as all, right? And so it could be potentially whatever would have been most comforting for me in that time, is how he would have showed up. And he started giving me all of this information, about as I was moving toward this light and I was experiencing this brilliant sound. and these brilliant light experiences. And he started telling me about what was happening, or what it was less of like a life review, and it was more of like, here's what's going to happen next, right? Like your husband's going to be really devastated. This is going to happen, and your son has passed, and I'll get to that in just a second. But and your family's going to be really upset. And I just was at this point kind of like, well, and so it is, and so it is, and I knew they would be okay. And there were images of my life and like the sense of a life review, but it was more just what was related to the spirit guides. And so it wasn't just really my life that I was reviewing as Melinda. It was really like all of the lives that I had, depending on who the spirit guide was like coming around, and kind of I would remember, different aspects of what we shared together. And then some of those, after I've journaled about them for a really long time, I recognize were in those dreams in my 20s as well. So the guide, okay, so my son comes into it, and I find out um, that it's a boy. And we had nicknamed our pregnancy after, so we got married in Sedona, Arizona. And we nicknamed our pregnancy because we didn't want to know gender, so we weren't using names, after the oak trees in Sedona. So our baby's name was Oak. So baby Oak came into the presence, and recognized him. And I was just filled with more joy, right, that we were on this experience together. And there were aspects too of that were, there were some like reviews that I was seeing too, as well as like the banks of Oak Creek, um, and just like certain images that were coming up for me in Sedona. And there was like a reminder that how beautiful this life is, and to get back to nature and to get back to earth, and what a celebration that is, right? And that was like kind of one of the first indications that I was actually going to go back to my body. And so my guide, I did not have a choice. My guide started telling me, revealing to me, you are going to go back to your body. You're going to go back to a very sick body. And I want you to know that the wisdom is in your body. And as your body heals, and as your body goes through this experience, I want you to look at it as a learning experience, and I want you to find the joy in the small moments of reverence for your body in this, because this will get you through. And so at that point, I knew, okay, so I was going back. I didn't really want to. I wanted to continue on the journey, which is kind of a hard thing for people who cared about me to hear. It's really difficult to explain, especially in our limited language, what that means. It doesn't mean, like that I had desires to die by suicide, or desires to die at all, or die, it's really just about that's just a really another way to magnify the fact that there was so much love and illumination and safety on the other side, and so much to explore. Like I felt like as I was moving and into this light, that there was going to be so much more to experience. And it was a curiosity, right? So it didn't really have anything to do with our humanness, and as far as like needing to die or wanting to die, I was just ready. I was prepared. I was enjoying the situation. I was safe, and curious. So so the point came where I was gonna come back to my body, and my guide told me that the wisdom's in the body. You're gonna go back. You're gonna be sick. Just follow it. Find the little pieces of joy you can. Look at it as a spiritual experience, and you will come out of this okay. And I said, well, but what about my son? And when I say this, I'm saying it in our language, but really it's all telepathic. We are having completely telepathic communication. And also, like, you can have communication with multiple spirit guides at a time too. It's really hard to describe, but you can just hold multiple different, excuse me, um, conversations at the same time. Again, looking at this idea that it's not linear, so that it's just kind of all experiencing at the same time. And excuse me. So I said, "What about my son?" And he said, "He's going to stay here. But I want you to know that as you go back into your body, he is going to be his spirit, his being, his essence is going to be integrated into your heart, into a little hammock in your heart, so that every time when your heart beats, you're going to be able to rock him." And I believe, based on my medical records and putting all the pieces together, that that is the point when my blood pressure is stabilized and I started to come back.
Wow. So incredible. These stories, although they have elements that mimic each other, that reflect each other's experiences, they can be so vastly different. So I want to go back and ask you some questions about the beings that met you on the other side. Do you have any idea the quantity of them that were there?
Oh, there were hundreds, and the
100. Okay.
hundreds,
I don't think I
yeah.
was picturing that when you were talking about it. So hundreds of beings all connected to you. Some of
Mhm.
them that you recognize, some of them that you knew, but you hadn't had an earthly incarnation this time with them. And what did they look like? Did they have an appearance that you can describe?
Yeah, the best way I can really describe it is they looked like neon light outlines, but neon lights, but much more beautiful, much more brilliant. They do not have a form like we do as a human. Immediately recognize them, at least in my experience, through that telepathic recognition, because they don't have necessarily any kind of human features like hair and eyes and hands. In my experience, they're just basically made up of this like a neon light prism, I guess, is the best way I can describe it. And even though there were hundreds, it wasn't necessarily like I needed to speak with all of them. It was just sort of more that awareness, again, that um just kind of this reunion of love and homecoming. And it didn't need to. Yes, there were others that I spoke to that maybe gave me some information about, like, the greater purpose and greater experience and why we come to earth. And there was a lot, like, just it's constant information, like I was saying. And yet, like, I talk about the one spirit guide because that was a relationship to my son, but there was a lot of others too that were kind of giving me this love and information. And there were some that were just kind of like a chorus in the background that were just reminding me, all roads lead to one, we are all connected, kind of this like underlying vibration, hum, drum beat, kind of reminding me as I move forward toward this light.
I love that you glossed over the statement of like they were giving me some information like why we come here. So hold on, rewind that. Like, what did they communicate with you about why we come here that you could share?
Sure. Yeah, and I've tried to put it into our language the best way I can. Um, we we experience all of this love on the other side, and we're also able to be aware of what's happening to our loved ones on Earth. We can communicate with our loved ones on Earth. It's a two-way conversation, sometimes multiple way conversation, right? But we can, and so we're aware of what's going on. It's not like always present in our mind, but we can kind of check in. Um, and since it's not again, it's not really our mind, but we can check in, and also like we have this omnipotence, right? And so we kind of know when to check in. We see that the earth struggles. Like we see that the humans struggle. We see that there's strife and there's pain and um, guilt and shame and greed and all these things, right? We see that humans struggle, and we know that that's part of the human experience, but we want to change that. So some of us get called to say, we're going to come back, we're going to reincarnate as a human, we're going to go back into this flesh, and we're going to bring this message of love forward, and we're going to change this because they're on this amazing planet with all the gorgeous things to see, like Sedona and you name it, right? All these gorgeous things to see and to experience and to love and to have, and to even aging, right, is this like incredible experience that not everybody gets to do. They're taking it for
I wish
good.
I could look at it a little bit more like that, but okay.
You're right. I'm mid 40s now. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm starting to like work on those tools a little bit more. But yeah, um, yeah, yes. And and we just we're like, why don't they get it? Okay, I'm gonna go back into a human body, and I'm gonna bring this message of love forward, and it's gonna happen. We're gonna make it happen. And then we get here and we're kids, and we, start exploring our environment kind of like I did with my hands, and I'm just like, okay, this is amazing. All these things are happening. And then we start responding to all the people's pain. And because we're in this human body, as we age, and especially I think they say by 5, like your personality is kind of cementing in, and like things start to change. Although, for every person it's very different, and some people kind of hold on to it for forever, and some people, and we're all capable of coming back to it. Um, but we're just responding to so many things. We're very responsive beings as humans. We have this body, and we start to get nervous about death, and we start to have all these experiences and fears that start to pull us away from that love. It's not gone. It's just kind of clouded over by this human experience. And so when we come back into this earth and we want to spread this message of love, and we really want to try, and we're so sure we can do it, right? It's not easy. It's not easy.
I have no
Um,
idea what you're talking about. No, that's so true. I mean, you have these experiences, and even I think a lot of people have this perception that you have these incredible experiences on the other side, and then you don't have to have the human experience, but nobody escapes that being here, I feel.
yes.
So when you were seeing all these different beings, was there anybody that you looked back on later and you were like, "Oh wow, I was surprised I saw XYZ," or anything along the effects of that?
Um, I think that I was kind of hoping to see some of the beings that had passed on. They were there, but I was hoping to have more interaction with them, like my grandfather, and just some other people who had died in my life. And they weren't really like, they were kind of more in that chorus, but I didn't have a one-on-one reaction interaction with them. Um, but I also understand that like that's possible too, right? And so it just wasn't necessarily in this experience. And I also think like it could be related to whether or not they came back into the human experience too. And so just there's a different kind of a different element and different awareness of what's possible there. But yeah, it was. And also, like, I knew that they were infused in that love, and so it really didn't matter whether or not I had a one-on-one interaction with them. Um, what I did know, and I felt to be true, and I was told by one of my guides, was that I didn't really know my grandfather, but I also know there was a complicated relationship there with my family, and he was in World War II, and he had a lot of trauma that was never solved and never healed in this life. So it was a complicated relationship, and also I was young when he passed. but I was told that, if there are complicated relationships in this human experience, and if there isn't an ability to heal that relationship, or there's some reason, maybe it's alcoholism or anger, or there's something that cannot be healed, that it will get healed on the other side. So if there
So
is a
not
thing,
even wait, hold on a second. I want to make sure I'm clarifying this.
yeah,
I've not heard somebody say that. I've heard a ton of people say, "Oh, you're going to have to come back and have a different interaction with that person and heal it again in the earthly incarnation." But you're saying, no, you can actually heal on the other side if you didn't accomplish it here. You know why I
yes,
love that you're saying that?
that was my
How
experience. Yeah.
how many people are watching right now that lost somebody and you have words that you feel like, I didn't get to say this, I should have said this. And then again, we torture ourselves about would have, could have, should have. But to have that peace, to know that you're going to be able to come in maybe from that state of love on both sides and
Mhm.
understand and resolve it, I think has the potential to heal a lot of people watching.
I hope so. I really hope so, Lori. And I have heard those other experiences, and I validate that that's true. In some, for me, it was very clear. It was very clear, and I hold that throughout my life, that if you don't get that last minute chance to say I love you, they die suddenly, something like that happens, you will have your opportunity to be in that infused love experience with them, and it will all be well on the other side. And I strongly believe that in my consciousness because that was my experience.
I
And
love it.
yeah, and I use that to guide me through life too, because I think it's really important in this human experience that um, and this is kind of getting into the weeds, but that we take care of ourselves, right? And we don't enable a person just because we feel like, okay, say if they have a disease, right? That's like alcoholism or narcissism or something, right? That's just really hard to kind of connect with them in a human and spiritual level in this life. Um, it's not up to us to try to heal that in such a way that we feel okay, that it's been that, it's not worth our human experience to try to continue to try to fix that just so that you can like make sure that you have that statement that they understand that you love them. You can love them and still create boundaries so that you can be in your own human experience and have a well experience, knowing that on the other side, this will be healed and this will be solved. So that this is like a permission slip, right? To not, to be in yourself, to care for yourself, and to not allow that these human experiences, these human relationships to guide um, and make you sick yourself, right? And so for me, like that's been something I've held on to ever since. That okay, including like my dad passed from Alzheimer's, and so that was difficult. He knew I loved him, but also like there were things that we couldn't share. There were things we couldn't talk about. There were things, it was very hard at the end. It was really challenging to care for him, so we had to, help get other types of care for him, and there was a lot of guilt around that too. And you know, I also know, right, that we love each other, and also like on the other side, all will be well. All will be well.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot, and everything is unfolding perfectly in along those the lines and premises. So you also said that you experienced in your call it a life review with air quotes because it doesn't it you've just because you've caveated that it's not quite like a life review, but you saw experiences in multiple different lifetimes. So were there any that you attached to that you could remember of a lifetime that you uncovered that you had that you want to share?
Yeah, there was one in particular that was very, so I'm half Mexican, and I had one where I was in Mexico. It was very dry, very arid. It was an old, like kind of log cabiny house, and I was wearing this beautiful dress, and I was just doing like some manual labor. I was washing some clothes. Um, and that was kind of all it really was. Um, but it just felt like, oh yes, like that's me, or that's like a me experience that I had. And kind of like allowing it to unfold nowadays and like looking at it a little bit more. I've been more curious, and I've kind of like potentially like pinpointed a location, but I'm not exactly sure. But it was like north of Mexico City. And there was kind of like a just you know, I was taking care of my family. I don't know how many children I had, but I think it was also like a recognition of, you're losing your son, but you're still a mother. Uh,
Oh, because
that was the story
you've
in that.
been
Yeah.
that role before.
Yes. Yes.
Ah, I love that. So tell us a little bit more about the comfort that you got on the other side. And I love the reference that they told you that the hammock was going to be the rocking because Melinda, what are hammocks attached to?
Trees.
And what was his name?
Oak. Oh my gosh, I never made that connection before.
As soon as you said that, it went like that for me.
Oh, Lori, thank you. I have never made Oh my goodness, I love that.
I love that too. I love that too. As soon as you said that, I'm a big hammock person, so I'm a big tree person. So I connected those dots. But how special to have that.
Yes, yes.
So
Yeah,
tell everybody watching a little bit more about the feelings that you have because you're still grieving him, even though you get this, this information, it still doesn't take away from the fact that you're grieving a loss that physically won't be experiencing. But for people who are watching, like what can you share with them that will help them if they're having a similar type of experience?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I had this experience of the other side. I know that he's well, I know that he's loved, and I'm still a human, and I still experience grief. And what I want to share is that grief is real, and it's going to happen, whether or not they're okay, right? And so one of the first things is like the language that we use around anybody who's grieving, whether it's a baby or really anybody, is never to jump right to that they're okay, right? It's never to say, but they're in a better place, right? Because that language does not, it does not hold the human experience that we're having, which is grief. And so two things can be true, but also like grief is such a raw, real emotion. That's where we need to start with just I am holding space for you. I'm sorry. This is unfortunate. So anybody who's lost a child also knows that sometimes it's disenfranchised grief. Oh, you were only 6 weeks along, you can get pregnant again, right? Or, the reality is as soon as you know you're pregnant, you're already planning the future. You're already planning what their crib will look like, what kind of clothes they're gonna wear, where they'll go to school. I mean, you name it, right? Your birthing plan. It's all there as soon as you know. And so whether the loss is at 6 weeks or 40 weeks, it doesn't really matter to our being. We're gonna experience the grief. And it's very real grief, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you can get pregnant again. It has nothing to do with what the future might look like for you. In my future, I have we have adopted a child, and she's currently 3, and she's amazing. Um, but I it doesn't matter, right? I still grieve. I still grieve Oak. I still grieve him, and I've learned as part of my grief that I can also have a relationship with him on the other side. And so your baby for you, whether you've named them or, whatever your experience is, you can give them a name if you want to. You can ask them for guidance. They're one of your spirit guides. And you can talk to them. You can have a ritual, right? For me, obviously, it's oak leaves that I see or the banks of Oak Creek, right? That really brings me back to his presence where we can communicate, where we can be one and be together. But that might look different for you. Maybe it's dragonflies, maybe it's butterflies, maybe it's hummingbirds, maybe it's, rocks, right? Everybody can um, have, and you'll know what that element is that you'll need to connect with your baby. And yeah, I want you to know that your loss is honored and it matters, and you're loved and you're not alone.
Well, I think that that's very, very powerful for everybody who's listening. Two more questions I want to ask you. One is, it's an interesting common theme for a lot of NDEers who are told that they have to go back. They don't have a choice. They're not given a choice. Would you like to speak about that a little bit and what your thoughts have been since all that happened?
Yeah. Yeah, I was not given a choice. I know, yeah, other NDA years sometimes have a choice. I just look at this as my bonus life because many people have had lost loved ones very suddenly or young or right, and their life is not any less important than mine. So I have bonus time. We all have a purpose, so I just have bonus time to serve my purpose. Now that I have this awareness, right, that the wisdom is in our body, I'm able to share that with the world and I'm able to explore that with the world. That's not to say that one of your loved ones who passed early didn't have a purpose. They did have a purpose in their life, right? And they just were able to express it in their short time in a different way. I have this bonus time. I'm expressing my next purpose, and I think we have multiple purposes in our life. It's not just one. I'm expressing this next purpose with this bonus time, and I'm very fortunate. And I didn't have a choice. That's something greater than me. That's something greater than me. It's part of this love consciousness on the other side, and part of this like greater greater something that I can't explain, but I just know it as love and as peace, and it's okay, right? Um, so yeah, for me, it's just sort of some people do and some people don't, and it's all valid, right? Because I'm not any more special than you or anyone else, right?
Yeah, I totally get that too.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to ask you about is something that not everybody who has a near death experience talks about. And this is just so fascinating to me about you having multiple conversations going on at the same time. And I think maybe at first, what it elicits for me is I'm standing in a group and you're talking, and then this other person is talking, and this other person is talking. But I do understand that our souls are so powerful, much more powerful and much different. And then when you're communicating, if it's telepathic, you're not just trying to get these sentences out, but it's imparting emotions attached to showing somebody what you mean as opposed to explaining what you mean. So, as best you can you talk and speak to a little bit about the power of our souls on the other side in the way that we're able to interact?
Mm. Yeah. Okay. I love this question, Lori. So I think getting back to the transformational sound that I was hearing, from hearing what was happening to my body and then hearing the transformational sound that was on the other side. This, these conversations were telepathic and also like they were made up of this music. And so like if you're studying or reading a book and you have music on in the background, like your consciousness, right, can hold all that. And it's like that on the other side. Yes, it was telepathic communication, but also like this angelic, gorgeous, beautiful music. And I think I've heard like Anita Morjani has like a similar experience, and she wrote down like she actually had music created for it. I would imagine that's really difficult because it's like so beautiful. Um, but this music is really another way, right? So it's sort of like the souls are themselves like chords or notes, and they're playing in the background, and you're having like these primary kind of telepathic conversations, but also the notes are like playing in the background, and it's like you're still able to feel the music, you're still able to emote with the music, it still moves you. And in that way, you're gaining all the access to all this information again, like some of it being like, why do we come here? And some of it like, again, that idea of like the wisdom is in your body, and understanding like I could get back to my body and like learn about the ways that it too is magic. But all of these conversations were like infused also in this music. And so yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, reading or talking to somebody with music in the background. But this light is what's actually transforming it. This light that we are, the power that we are. We do not need to learn to do this. We do not need to, we just are. And that's all encapsulated within us now, right? And we have access to it now. It's just we have to get through some of that other, right, humanness, and then kind of learn to hold both of it. But it's yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe it. It's just really like having amazing, beautiful music on in the background while you're getting all of this information and telepathic communication. But the music itself is the power of the soul.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that because that's fascinating. Have you ever come across any music that comes close to what you experienced on the other side?
No,
No.
I
Guess
wish
we're
I
gonna
could
have
say
to just
that.
wait.
Yeah. I mean, I think the vibration, like if you go to like a sound healing or a sound bath, like that vibration is very, very, that feels very much like home. Because and again, like it's moving your cellular tissue, it's moving your cells, which is very connected to spirit. And so for me, like it, mm, it's music, but it's also like something that can't necessarily be played. It's just like it's in the vibrational, it's in the intonation. So
Mm,
I would say that, yeah, like sound bowls, sound healing, something to that end, like gongs, like sacred gongs, that kind of that vibrational piece of it, right, that we hear as music as humans is really what it is, for
mm,
me. And so writing a piece like that, I think, although I mean, I think it's possible to get close. I don't think in our human, the way that we sense things as a human body, the way our ears actually work, is limiting, right? So
sure.
it would be
Yeah.
pretty challenged. Yeah.
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 Very interesting. Well, I am really happy that you've shared this conversation. I would imagine that there are people that are watching who have really connected with you and they want to connect with you some more. So how can people find you, work with you? What do you have going on that you want people to know about?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that, Lori. They can find me at scarletcenter.com. So it's CARLIT center.com. Or
Oh, that's
actually, Melinda
Scarlett.
Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Melinda Peterson also works, .com. And so I'm a nurse, but also an intuitive healer. And since I came back with this information that the wisdom is in the body, I do intuitive readings to find out like what our souls, what our cells, and what our organs are really trying to tell us. And so that could look like something maybe medically that's happening, but also like something emotional because they're interconnected, right? And like what is that here to tell us and that we could use as information for life? So I do these readings for folks. So you could find that on scarletcenter.com. I also like if you're having like kind of trouble navigating something in like the medical space, or just feeling like you're not being heard, I just kind of offer like listening and holding sessions and and some guidance on what you could do next in that situation. So much of like what we have lost in our that is in our humanity that we're able to do, but we've lost kind of in our medical system is that ability to hold space for others in a real way. And so yeah, so that's something that I offer as well. And I'm also on Instagram at In Tune with Melinda. So yeah, I'm there and I talk about like more kind of I don't know, I go into a lot of topics, but near death experience, adoption after loss, some of the wisdom that our body's trying to tell us. It's very like kind of organic. But that's where those are the two places that you can find me.
Beautiful. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I so appreciate you sharing something like this. This is a really, I think it's a subject for you that probably is very close to your heart even now. And I would imagine there's a little bit of difficulty in opening yourself up because people make judgments and they make comments. And I just want to thank you so much for being brave and for wanting to share this story with the world, because every time you do, you are connecting to somebody else and you have no idea the ripple effect that you might have on them in their healing process, which ultimately makes you just even more of a healer. So thank you so much for what you are doing to help wake up the collective consciousness. I know how much it is needed right now.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you for providing this judgment-free, loving, and comfortable space for us to share this important conversation. And please continue to do the work that you do as well, because yes, we need you.
Oh, thank you. It is my greatest pleasure to do this. Every time I have one of these conversations, like this is the best thing that happened to me today. So thanks for being a part of that for me. And thank you to everybody for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.